Hello and welcome back to Scale War Machines. This is AFV Club's plastic model of the Sdkfz.251 Kanonenwagen, the late version of the famous German half-track equipped with the short-barrelled 75mm gun from the Stug 3 in Panzer IV. It was used as an expedient infantry support vehicle from late 1942 onwards. It's a decent enough reference, but it suffers from some fitment issues, as you'll see at the end, which spoilt what would otherwise be an enjoyable kit. It was kindly built by Scale War Machines collaborator Jerome Trombetta in 2014 and is briefly featured in a couple of past videos. In this video we'll be continuing the series on creating realistic vehicle interiors to follow on from the M113 ACAV film, and the Sdkfz.251 will be our subject. It has patiently waited on a hard drive for over 10 years, so I may as well set it free. It will give us a chance to explore all aspects of building, painting and finishing a late war German AFV, and there'll be plenty of tips along the way. I thought about just editing the interior part of the build for the video, but as I had good coverage of the painting, we'll start with that. Specific tips for creating a realistic interior will be covered in the second half, and if you want to skim to that, I've put the timestamp on the screen. So let's start with the paint scheme. This is how the model arrived, and the first step was to get some primer on. The model is going to be base coated with water-based acrylics, so the first step was to use some brown surface primer from Ammo. I'll put any paint codes on screen as per usual. Primer was lightly sprayed over the entire model and the various sub-assemblies. Just build up light coats and blow air over the paint if it starts to get too thick or runny. These other colours from the Ammo surface primer range were also used. As this is later in the war, some liberties were taken throughout this build, showing more components in primer, depicting the shortages of paints and other materials. A light dusting of rust was applied. Followed by a really thin coat of sand. The sand was sprayed more thickly over some wheels. This meant there was a variety of shades for the road wheels. I also misted light coats over the whole of the half-track. Here's how the model looks at this stage. Note that some components were left in the sand, brown or red oxide primer. Paints again came from the Ammo acrylic range and were specific to the late war period. These were selected as the base coats for the Dunkel Gelb. Progressively lighter Dunkel Gelb shades were carefully sprayed on, using the references in the set. The lightest shades were combined for the highlights. The gun and breech will be a central part of the vehicle's interior, so some of the painting was done as a sub-assembly off the model. Here are all the components, and you can see the simple highlighting effect achieved by using progressively lighter coats of base shade. Bear in mind most of this will be covered in camouflage, so it's debatable if it's worth it. Let me know in the comments if you bother pre-shading or not. Masking off the Dunkel Gelb part allowed me to spray the internal components in a dark primer colour. As you'll see later on, the interior will also be painted as if it has been left in primer. I then used a variety of different red oxide paints from different ranges. These included Ammo by MiG and Vallejo. And they all helped me get that red oxide metal primer colour. I also went around the whole hull and the gun and picked out various individual components in all these different shades of red oxide primer, something which added depth. As the finish is going to be weathered, a coat of Vallejo chipping medium was sprayed over the model. I've made a video on this product and you can find out more there. If you've seen the Panzer Putty video I made a few years ago, you might know that this is how I elected to do the hard-edged late war camo. Using this malleable putty, I first created the camo shapes, and then I could spray in between. The whole process and the properties of these sorts of putties can be seen in my previous video. The colours came from Ammo by MiG and Vallejo Modulaire. You could also use silly putty for this type of masking, and there's a video on that too. I'll put links to all these additional videos in the description below. Lightened highlights were mixed and sprayed to match the effect seen in the base coat. Once happy, the putty could be peeled back. Any repairs are easily made. And this is what we're left with. Any overspray is simply removed with some thinners. You can see the chipping medium has already eroded some paint around the edges, and it can be properly removed and controlled with water. Go slowly and gently lift off the top coat of paint with water or a moist brush. The water reacts with the chipping medium and degrades the paint coat on top. In areas of very heavy wear and tear, you can apply lots of water for maximum chipping. Any other final tweaks and improvements could be made to leftover sub-assemblies. The insides of the road wheels, meanwhile, got further layers of red oxide primer, in this case from Life Colour, so it's ready for the next step. Detail painting was done with enamels for the rubber road wheels. Whilst Vallejo model colour acrylics were used for exterior parts of the half-track and the benches. The tools also needed some detail painting. I tried to proceed in a logical fashion, picking out anything in brown at once. Little details like the breech and padlocks were painted in Vallejo's alcohol-based liquid metal range, while dry transfers were used for the exterior markings from Wilder and later from Archer. A quick airbrush coat of Johnson's Clear sealed in the dry transfers. Before I applied various highlights using a bit of masking and some lightened shades. This is a bit like modulation. Now I'm starting to focus a bit more on the interior, and especially that main gun. The first interior finishing tip then is to use one of my favourite paint products, Humbrol Metal Coat, a burnishable enamel which dries quick and can be polished to a pleasing metal-like shine. This was used on the breech block and polished with a cotton bud. Metallic shades from the same range were dry brushed gently over the floor template to show wear. These paints are a fantastic way to get realistic metal effects on your models, and they are especially useful for worn areas inside vehicles. You can also see that a bit of detail painting of some internal components has begun in Vallejo sand. Some enamel-based washes were applied to the exterior to add shadow detail and panel lines. Rust from MIG Productions and streaking grime from ammo added to the shadow effect. Now focus is moving much more towards the interior and the pursuit of realistic details. The Sdkfz.251 was an open vehicle, so we're going to need to really work on getting the interior to look convincing. This leads us to my second tip, using instrument dial transfers, in this case from Archer. These were dry transfers, researched and made specifically for this sort of half-track. To use them, take a blunt stick, in this case a cuticle pusher, and you could rub them onto your model. But it's way better to use them in combination with the Archer wet medium paper. This is how these products are designed to be used. Rub them onto the paper and you'll get a traditional Waterslide decal, or decal. It helps if you cut them out, of course, so you get less carrier film. They're then really easy to apply and fine-tune using something like Microset and Microsol. Job done, and the level of realism is considerably improved. The Placards too add a neat touch. Various bits of work continued simultaneously on the exterior, like painting tyres, some exterior markings and numbers, and a sloppy mud mix using pigments and plaster of Paris. Water and mud effects were added to the lower and the upper hull, using murky water from Wilder and liquid from Winsor & Newton. Other dark enamel washes can be mixed with liquid and murky water for yet more wet shadows and moisture. You can also create streaks and runs of moisture. After a quick coat of paint on the tracks, we can start with the most fun bit of this build, the interior. Tip 3. Other bits of detail painting of interior components were completed off camera, using acrylics and a fine brush. Items like the MP40, extinguishers and gas masks were all painted, whilst plenty of paint chips were brushed on all over the interior. Cable details were added with solder and lead wire, then painted. As seen in previous videos, my technique is to select a bunch of accessories and attach them to a background for painting with superglue or double-sided tape. In this case it was a sheet of used food packaging from the recycling bin, and some cyanoacrylate or superglue, an easy way to give leftover household materials a second life. They get a coat of surface primer to seal everything, before painting anything metallic in Vallejo's liquid metal shades. These are items which will be bright metal or scratched and damaged. The metallic shades provide the bright underlying colour when the top shades are painted and then chipped. Here again, Vallejo chipping medium will do that for us, so a liberal coat is applied. Then detail painting progresses. Like usual, with an airbrush or paintbrushes and various acrylic paints, here from Life Colour, and also Vallejo. Highlights and any colour details are picked out too, much like painting a uniform. Tip 5. Stencil details add realism, and Waterslide German transfers help out here. Here you can see our selection of bits and bobs, including chipped and weathered items and some personal gear. Generally, if it looks harmonious and right to your eyes on the card, it should look good inside the vehicle too, in terms of the combination of items and their colours. Once detached, you get a further sense of how all the accumulated stuff will look. I merrily started trying everything out and attaching everything using white glue. In this case, Speed Bond from Deluxe Materials, applied with a syringe. There's no right or wrong way to apply these items, just use your imagination, and the white glue allows you to reposition stuff if something doesn't look good. All sorts of items were used, including some classics and some lesser known accessories. So see if you can spot where they came from and list them in the comments. I love trying to spot where accessories on models have come from. In these photos you can see an important addition and something I think it's crucial to show in your model interiors: mud and dirt. My next step therefore was to add muddy footprints from all the comings and goings of the crew. The exterior is muddy, so it's reasonable to think the floor would be muddy too. My tip is to add boot marks and mud deposits. This is done with these caliber 35 resin boot stamps and some mud in a pot from Reality and Scale. The set has both soft and hard boot stamps, which carry sole detail. You dip your boot in your mud and get stomping. Mix up and vary your mud shades, and this is what you get. Another way to add more realism to your interiors is to add tarps and fabric items like blankets. One easy approach to do this is to use 2-part Tamiya quick type putty. Once mixed, it's really easy to shape and sculpt, and it dries very smooth. You can roller it with some talcum powder and get really thin sheets. You can then fold these sheets to make blankets or scrunch them up to show crumpled items of clothing or tarps. Lay them over items to get the appropriate shape, and then leave to dry. They'll dry hard and are easy to paint once fully cured. Here is the finished interior. Any moisture effects can be replicated inside the model as necessary. The final touch is to use paper accessories to add further signs of life and a crew who actively use the interior. That included maps for navigation and a spot of propaganda in the form of Signal magazine, even if at this stage of the war there can't have been much good news contained within. And that concludes this kit, which was fun to make, but as a major fitment issue was only noticed when you glue the upper hull, the model ended up spoilt by an ugly join on one side where the hull top mates to the bottom. So this model definitely has a hidden side, which we'll call its off-camera side. I've since learnt that this is a well-known flaw in this kit, rather than my own fault, so if you're building this model, watch out for that trap. It might be better to join the hulls before painting and sort out the join then. Despite this, I still like the finished piece, and especially the interior, and it may one day make it into a diorama. Plus, filming the process is still useful to us, even if the model itself is flawed. You win some and you lose some, I guess. Anyway, I hope you found this useful. If you did, why not consider subscribing, as there'll be more videos coming soon. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.
Subscribe for our latest videos.